Welcome to the Jill on Money Show. It's Sunday, July 28th. And if you haven't listened to yesterday's show, maybe you want to start with it because I explained that we're airing an episode of Ask the Compound on our stream here. This is a show that is co-hosted by Ben Carlson and Duncan Hill, two of the members of the Ritholtz Wealth Management team. Duncan's the creative guy. Ben's the numbers guy. I love them both, so it's great. So this is me as a guest on their program, Ask the Compound. If you've got financial questions, you can always send them over to us. Go to jillonmoney.com, click the Contact Us button, and don't forget to check the box if you want to join us on the air live. Okay, here's part 2 of my appearance on Ask the Compound.
Up next, we have a question from Joe. I've been investing for almost 5 years now and have had an automatic deposit of $25 to $50 set up for each Friday into my brokerage account. I also put all income tax refunds straight into this brokerage account. Doing this, I've built up a nice $25,000. My partner and I are only 27 years old, and we do very well for ourselves. I've been slowly building up positions in various companies by purchasing stock slices and almost never sell, not trying to time the market. I'm a CPA and have been working in financial due diligence for a few years, so I trust myself to be able to know what's important on a company's financial statements. My thesis is to buy stock in companies that hold significant market share in industries that have a high cost of entry and companies that play a large part in everyday life. What tips and tricks do you have for me? Should I be more willing to offload positions in quality companies when I'm up big? For example, I currently have multiple positions that are up 50+%, not to brag. I always reinvest all dividends and just let quality companies do their thing, even during downswings in stock price.
This question was the human condition. Part 1 was extremely confident. I know what I'm doing. Listen, I know everything about a financial statement. Part 2 was, wait, what the hell do I do here?
Well, and is there a great Wizard of Oz behind that curtain that can show me tips and tricks?
First of all, I want to give
answer is
Joe,
yes.
I think this is from Joe. I want to give him credit. So he said he does, I always say, for young people, he's saying he does $25 to $50 a week, starting small. Yeah, I totally applaud that. I think that's the way to go. You start small and you build up. Mm-hmm. And he's saying, like, I've been doing this for a few years and it worked. And he's got a nice $25,000 in the brokerage account. I don't personally have any tips or tricks, except that you're 27 and eventually you're going to be humbled by the market. So I would just prepare for that. Sounds like you have a pretty good process, know what you're doing. I think it's much easier to buy stocks than it is to know when to sell them.
That's absolutely great advice.
Very easy to come up with an idea to buy a stock. This thing looks great. It's beaten down, or it's gone up a lot, or the company is outperforming, or I use the products, whatever it is. Knowing when to sell is way, way harder than knowing when to buy.
So smart. I would just say this, Joe, because you are CPAs. Also, one of the problems you're going to have is that you are a CPA and you're going to say, oh, if I sell this, I have to pay the tax.
Right.
And it's going to bum you out. So one idea might be, and I'm going to presume that you're sort of, because it sounds like you're sort of on the right track. So I'm going to presume when someone is doing something like this, that they're already maxing out their retirement account contributions, right? Like either you work for a company and you're putting money in the 401k, you got a Roth 401k, you got a Roth IRA. I'm also going to think, I think that one of the ways that you can become a little bit better of a seller is to create a stock account with an IRA or Roth IRA, because I think you stop yourself from selling sometimes because of taxes, even though that's silly because tax rates are pretty low and capital gains rates are low. But this would be no excuse. And you could say to yourself, I got 25 grand. I have $10,000 in gains. I'm going to look at each position. I'm going to sell half. I'm going to move on. I'm going to add to the portfolio. I just think people are hesitant to do that in taxable accounts, and I get why. But I just think that if you want to try to be a better seller, sometimes it's better to do your experimenting in a Roth account.
Yes, and I also like the idea of I have my set it and forget it portfolio over here for the 401k or the Roth IRA. Leave that alone. Do your stock picking over here in the brokerage, and then you can also compare.
Yeah.
Like, am I actually adding any value here? Or am I just doing this for fun and entertainment purposes?
Which is fine.
That's the point. But just admit it to yourself. Like, I'm trying to beat the market and I'm going to have alpha or whatever. Or I'm doing this because I like following companies. I'm a CPA. I like following financial statement analysis. If I don't beat the market, I don't care. I'm still going to keep doing this. I would just be honest with yourself about why you're doing this in the first place.
Right. And by the way, if something happens to cause you to feel anxious about markets overall, then if you're going to do your experimenting with market timing, even though you say you're a buy and hold person, which is always easier to do when markets are rising, just don't mess around with the real money. This is your fun money. You can do that, not the real money.
I always say that buying is easy. The holding part, that's hard. That's
yeah.
very hard.
Do either of you have like a limit where if you hit that percentage gain on an individual holding, you start trimming, or do you just kind of wing it? That's what I think is so hard about this, right? Is everyone has like a different opinion about, start taking some gains at 50%.
Duncan, I am so bad at stock picking. I've never hit my ceiling before.
Duncan, I don't own an individual stock. To be clear,
not to brag.
But when but just to be clear, I don't. But when I was a trader, I did it differently because I was an options trader. So for me, it was about the relative value of one position versus another position, and then selling is quite easy because you're like, wow, this like. Technically, when you go through and you look at the statistics, this is a bad position to hold versus this next position. So it's a little bit easier when you're looking at derivatives and how you unwind that. Yeah. And I always stopped out. I always had a stop loss.
That could be good sell discipline for stocks too. You say, I'm going to own 10 stocks, and when I want to buy a new one, it's got to be a better idea than the one that's currently in the portfolio. Something like that.
I like that.
That'd be good. Yeah.
Yeah, because the worst feeling I've experienced, honestly, is not stocks that you buy that just go down, but stocks that you buy that go up a lot. You hold them and then they go down. And then you're like, oh, cool. I could have made a lot of money on that, and now I'm at a loss. And
I will tell you, just like dealing with people and their money, I think what you realize is that people become attached to stocks. And as somebody who is working in an organization where the stock price, because of the Archegos crazy trading scheme that we saw, Paramount Global, the CBS stock went up close to 100, and now people are going to be so happy to get out at 15. The inability to sell something that you feel some attachment to is really, really tough.
All right.
That makes
question.
Sense. All right. Last but not least, we have a question from Caleb. Longtime listener and second-time emailer. My wife and I are 35, and we have 1.1 million in retirement accounts, invested 95% in S&P 500 index funds and 5% in the FLIN ETF. I'm not familiar
I had to look
with
that one up, Duncan. That is an India fund.
Oh, okay.
Nice,
wow.
nice run.
So we're all stocks here. Yep.
Okay. I'm wondering if we have enough invested to stop contributions and still be able to retire comfortably at 60 years old. We live in our long-term house and have 2 kids under 4. We make $220,000 in combined income and would like $10,000 a month during retirement, not future inflation adjusted.
Okay, so this is first
Can
of
you
all
explain that last part? I don't quite understand what they mean, not future inflation adjusted.
I think they're
In
saying
today's dollars.
Yeah, today's dollars. So first of all, nice job. Mid 30s, already have $1 million portfolio. 25 years until their retirement date. They have a high income. They have a spending goal in retirement. Like they're well on their way. They're already winning. So I took their $1.1 million portfolio and I said, okay, 4% return, 6% return, 8% return going forward. And we get almost $3 million, almost $5 million, and almost $8 million. So pretty good. That over 25 years, if that's your returns going forward, you're in a pretty good place. So 4% return, you get close to your $10,000 in spending. I didn't adjust this for inflation, but so even if you get 6, you're probably pretty well there adjusted for inflation. So they're pretty much on track if they didn't save another cent. My point is, why not give yourself a little wiggle room? Because you have the kids that are very young. Plans may change. Maybe you want to retire earlier. So let's do another one. So I said, what if they just save 10% of their income? They're saving $20,000 a year. Now, same return assumptions. We're talking almost $4 million, almost $6 million, and over $9 million. Which is pretty. So 8% return. They keep their money in stocks because they have aggressive allocation, and they take that 1.1 million and they save 10% of their income going forward. And I don't even adjust that for inflation. Just $20,000 a year for the next 25 years, and they get $9 million. Obviously, life doesn't always work out like a spreadsheet. We know this. It'd be nice if life worked out this way, but it doesn't happen linearly. But my point is, life never works out like the assumptions in a retirement spreadsheet. So why not give yourself a little bit of wiggle room? Why completely turn off the spigot of spending or saving when you could at least give yourself a buffer?
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, is there some idea that you want to save for college for your kids? Is that why? Is it just like we think we're over saving for retirement and we have other things we want to do? that's a different question, right? But I agree with you, Ben. There's no reason to sort of shut it down. First of all, if you're making 220, you have to at least put into retirement plans up to your match, right? So
Right.
that's like the easiest thing you can do. But I love the idea of saying, like, we did a heavy lift. Maybe we want to take some of that money, spend it a little bit more freely, put it into a 529 account for the kids, whatever that case may be. But the thing that's really weird is that you can sort of over save, right, for your retirement. That's fine. But if you over save, meaning that like you just put a little bit of extra money in a brokerage account, you can still spend it. But to Ben's point,
True.
you're giving yourself some wiggle room. So you can save some in retirement, some in brokerage, some in 529 plan, and then you're really giving yourself lots of opportunity. I wonder if, though, they're really just having a hard time figuring out how to not be really aggressive savers.
It could be because they've got a 7-figure portfolio at 35. So
I know. So
they're in the top 1% or whatever of 30-year-olds. But I mean, the personal finance example people always give, like, hey, if you save from 25 to 35 and never save again, versus the person who starts saving at 40, like these people are that example. They did it. And they're trying to they're seeing, can we actually get off this ride? But I think just to your point, like take the easy stuff or build up your taxable account that you can then, take out if you want to.
yeah,
But why
you do
stop?
whatever you want. You don't have
Yeah.
to, and you don't have to kill yourself. You know
Yeah,
what's funny?
turn the dial down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I just think that people are like a lot of the people who are obviously watching this kind of a show or tuning into all the compound shows. You're focused on your money, right? I get it. But it's okay to have some more balance in your life. We're not saying go spend every single dollar you have, but it's also okay to enjoy where you are and to have some fun along the way. And the people who really start to feel like, oh my God, I have to stop this craziness are often the people who have caused their own craziness. Like, you don't have to put that pressure on yourself. You might be in great shape and you can like take your foot off the pedal a little bit, but you should also understand that there's so many different twists and turns your life may take. Hey, maybe you wish you, if you stop saving 100%, maybe you have a great opportunity, go into business for yourself, and you wish you had the money saved to do it, but you can't. So I just like the idea of building lots of options for yourselves. That's, to me, is like, that's freedom. If you want to check out our YouTube show called Jill on Money, powered by The Compound, it lives on our website, jillonmoney.com, as does all of our content. While you're there, sign up for the free weekly newsletter. I love that newsletter. You can subscribe to us on the Odyssey app or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Please try to lift someone up. Change your work, change your wealth, change your life. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.